What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host, back for not just the first, but the technically third daily show and eventually fourth daily podcast of December 26th. Daily my butt. This is a press coverage show. We break down one topic in depth. Joining me to do so, Tyler Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
What's going on? Well, wow, you're going 4 in a row today.
Long time no see, man. How we been?
Good.
Yeah, you've been good in the last 45 minutes, I hope. We're going to talk about Tua Tagovailoa because, well, it looks like the Dolphins are probably going to make the playoffs anyway. I believe 538 has their playoff odds well north of 65%. Probably going to make the playoffs. A loss to New England would push them down to 51 or 50%, 51% maybe. And a loss to the Jets would eliminate them. Whereas, if they win their next two, they're just in. If they win, if they go 1-1, they got to get some help from other people, but they're like an 80% chance of getting in. And they're here because they're in this spot because they've lost 4 in a row. 3 of those on the road, at San Francisco, at the Chargers, at Buffalo, just a brutal stretch, and then lost 26-20 at home to Green Bay on Christmas Day, with Tua Tagovailoa going 16-25 for 310 yards, a pick, and a touchdown and 3 picks over his last 4 games, over that losing stretch. He's completing less than 53% of his passes, averaging 246 yards per game, and 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in that span. Suffice to say, Tua has not been good. And you look at the numbers in the second half, team didn't score a single point, went 7-13. This is on Christmas Day, 7-13, 81 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 33.3 passer rating. I mean, how much of the blame for the Dolphins' 4-game losing streak do we assign to Tua?
I think a good piece of it. And if you want to go back to why it started 4 games ago and what was kind of the genesis of what happened to Tua Tagovailoa, I think that this is a lot to say about DeMeco Ryans, the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, and one of the reasons why he's going to be one of the hottest coaching candidates this cycle this year, is how they defended Tua in this Miami offense and how the other teams following that game have done that. Basically, what they've done is press coverage, all of their speedy wide receivers at the line of scrimmage.
Wow, look at you. You use the name of the pod. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, seriously, he said it. And so you do press coverage at the line of scrimmage with your speedy wide receivers, kind of throw the rhythm off there, drop back into zone with 2 high safety. That is thrown Tua off to an ultimate degree, as you were saying with those stats. And you've seen the teams after that do that. The Chargers have done it. The Bills have done it. I didn't watch a ton of specifically what they were doing with the Green Bay Packers yesterday, but it feels like that's the mold that DeMeco Ryans has made. These other teams have followed it, and Tua has been following because of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because coming into the season, Tua was very much under heavy scrutiny as to whether or not he would be the quarterback of the future, because we had the 2 years with Brian Flores, yanked in and out of the starting lineup, often for Ryan Fitzpatrick oftentimes. Then you have, Mike McDaniel is hired. He calls Tua on the plane, when he's going to take the job, and it's like, we are going to make, we're going to be unbelievable together. Like, we're going to make this work. Like, it's a cool moment. You're a little skeptical about it, but then it actually, it does work, and they're both playing really well. Tua was, before this losing streak, 5-1 to win the MVP. He was one of the top 3 or 4 candidates in the entire league, and it looked like this was a team that was maybe going to win. They were in first place in the division when this losing streak started, and now they are kind of clinging to their playoff lives after losing to the Packers. What do we think about the long-term ramifications of this? Tua would be eligible for a contract after this offseason. It's impossible to imagine them giving him a huge contract, mainly because, I don't see Tua taking some kind of Derek Carr / Andy Dalton, half measure contract. I mean, you don't do that at that age, and when you're a top 10 pick, but you can't give him $40 million a year after what we've seen down the stretch here, right?
No, I don't think so. And ultimately that maybe this streak kind of brings down the price from him a little bit. But I do think that what we saw earlier in the year does eliminate are they going to get rid of him? Is he the guy? I think that what we've seen so far guarantees him getting a contract, staying in Miami for at least for the foreseeable future. It's just, what does that contract look like? But I don't know. Does he feel like to you? And again, it's money. Everybody get as much as you possibly can. But does he seem like somebody who's going to go to them and say, "I want top tier quarterback money"? It doesn't feel.
No.
I feel like you could. There's somewhere to be met there in the middle.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, although the problem is like if you have an agent, and most people do,
Oh, sure.
except for like Jacoby Brissett and Lamar Jackson, that agent isn't going to be like like it makes him look bad. It's tougher.
Yeah.
It's tougher,
Yeah.
and I don't even know who his agent is actually. But it's tough. It's almost impossible to. Oh, it's Lee Steinberg. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a guy who reps Patrick Mahomes, so you're not going to see. I forgot that I didn't know that actually. You're not going to see them take the Steinberg agency is not going to take, and the Cabot brothers or Chris Cabot, I guess, is perhaps the maybe the guy who's primarily working that negotiation. But you're not going to see the agents take less than maximum dollars, because then it becomes really tough to recruit guys coming out of college and saying, hey, you should work for us. And they're like, well, you gave you got two of this like mid-range deal. Like, I don't want to get mid-range deals. I want to get top tier deals. You're willing to take less than the maximum. So that's where it becomes really tricky with the Tua stuff. I would think. I saw they had a comment pop up that was like Tua franchise tag candidate. I would think what we'll see is this offseason Tua they pick up his 5th-year option. Like, he's been good enough to justify that. He had issues with even Sam Darnold got his 5th-year option picked up by the Panthers after he got traded from the Jets, wildly unnecessarily. Baker Mayfield, up and down, career, got his 5th-year option picked up. Somehow played for the Panthers and the Rams on that 5th-year option, and the Browns. Actually, excuse me, he didn't play for the Browns on that 5th-year option. But you see Daniel Jones did not have his 5th-year option picked up. A lot of times you see teams, if the quarterback is really struggling, if it doesn't look like he's a franchise guy, they'll pass on doing that. I think Tua has done enough through the first 3 quarters of this season that it's pretty easy to say, all right, we're gonna pick up that 5th-year option on him. We're not going to give him a contract over the 3rd year. Let's see what he does in the 4th year. And this all changes, of course, if Tua somehow gets to the playoffs and wins 2 playoff games and looks great doing it and is fine over the next 2 weeks. But just the last 4 weeks, defense is figuring out figuring out Mike McDaniel's offense, not able to adjust. And you saw Wilson said something on Sunday night. It was like Tua throws with like almost so much anticipation that maybe sometimes he's throwing too early and it ends up looking like a terrible pick because it's before Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle can get out of their breaks, which is, seems impossible. I just think it's a matter of you're not going to be like, you're just not going to give this guy a huge contract when you can say, listen, we want to see another year of you. We got the fourth year of the contract, 5th-year option. This is not a guy who's going to hold out. And then if you need to, you can franchise tag him. You can sort of drag out that process another, 3 years past this season without having to commit to a huge long-term deal.
Yeah. And I do think it's worth pointing out too, that we've talked about this in prior podcasts when we're talking about Tua Tagovailoa. Right before that West Coast trip going out to San Francisco, Los Angeles, and then eventually Buffalo before they went down to Miami, it's not like they were playing world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. You look at those 4 games prior to that trip, it's the Detroit Lions, who at the time were not great defensively. The Chicago Bears, who we all know are not great defensively. The Cleveland Browns, they've been up and down this season. Houston, and then the Houston Texans. Through that stretch, I mean, in one game against Detroit, he was completing over 80% of his passes. That's great. That's super efficient. But it's also, we are getting a look at when he's now playing legitimate playoff competition. And, Green Bay, we don't know if they're actually going to make the playoffs or not, but you're going up against a San Francisco 49ers defense that is the elite unit in the NFL. And that's what he needs to be measured towards. It can't be a week 8 game against Detroit when Detroit's on a downward swing. If he wants to have that contract, if he wants to be looked at as the franchise guy with no questions asked, it's those games against the Chargers, it's those games against the 49ers that you have to put a little bit more weight on.
Yeah, for sure. And again, to your point, they had that 5-game winning streak where he vaulted up to that MVP stretch, and it's the Steelers, Lions, Bears, Browns, and Texans. I mean, that's bad defenses that they're feasting on, and you have the bye week in between, and then it's just very yin and yang here between and it matches up with the schedule, and I think it just becomes problematic when you start talking about, can we give this guy a massive contract? Is he worth that? But we do think that the question, like, Tua is probably the franchise quarterback. Like, to your point, you're not trying to, like, if Tom Brady, I mean, all right, let me ask you this. Tom Brady comes to Miami this offseason and says, I want to let's run this back. They talked about doing it before this year. Do you replace Tua with Tom Brady?
No, I don't.
I don't think you do either.
You don't.
Because you're getting 2 years max out of Tom. He hasn't played well for the Buccaneers. He'll be energized being in the AFC East and playing for a different team and coming in hot and working in a Mike McDaniel offense. He would be good in that offense. Like let's not sugarcoat it. You're not going to bootleg him or anything, but you're talking about just dropping back, finding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle underneath. You got the good run game, and the offensive line too suffered some injuries, and that doesn't exactly help to his case. But yeah, I agree with that. I don't think you would want to replace Tua with Tom Brady just because you were trying to build for the long haul, and you're basically hitting the reset button. You're hoping you can cash in with a Super Bowl in a 2-year window with Tom Brady, a version of Tom Brady who looked a little washed up.
Right. And so, I'm not moving heaven and earth to try to bring in Tom Brady or any quarterback that could become available. But that was the discussion going into this season. It was make or break Tua. Is he going to be the guy, or do you just kind of blow it up and go after a Brady or a Garoppolo or somebody who, whoever else becomes available in a trade or something along those lines.
Before the season, if you'd said they're going to get Sean Payton and Tom Brady, you're like, yeah, you just do that.
Of course. It's a slam dunk.
If you move on from Tua and whoever else the next coach was going to be, it's worth it to try to get that combination and think about what they could do over a 2-year span. Now, when you find out that, Tua can play and Mike McDaniel looks like a really good head coach. And again, like we talked about this on Sunday's recap pod, but like if you told Dolphins fans that they would be 8-7 and in the playoff hunt with what I say 80%, 60%, 80%, 80%.
It was 60, and I'll tell you this: it was in the 80s going into that game yesterday.
Right. So is it
dropped
60%?
Significantly?
Yeah. Right. So it's 65% now or 60 into 60% to make the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would. I think they would take that coming into the year. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you would, because that would suggest to you that, again, Tua didn't blow up in your face, and it actually worked. And Mike McDaniel is a good first-year head coach, unlike the guy that we did an emergency podcast about, Nathaniel Hackett, earlier today. And so that's the thing about this, too, that I think is worth pointing out, is I want to see Tua and Mike McDaniel in year 2. There has been so much going in and out in terms of coaching for Tua that he's talked about publicly. Brian Flores, Chad O'Shea, the offensive coordinator during his first year. He's had a lot of instability at those key spots. And the fact that you have an equation that's worked, again, it's kind of fallen over the last few weeks, but overall, where we would say that this combination does work, or at least it was successful. So I want to see what that looks like with an off season of marination, a full season under their belt, and going into 2023, pretty much no questions asked, we are this combination. And so that, to me, I think is important here when we have that quarterback conversation with Tua. He's the future over the next couple of years, but I want to see him enhance his value with Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And because it's like a lot of times it takes more than 1 year for these quarterbacks to figure out these systems and to get in a position where they feel comfortable operating in that system. To learn. And look, the more offensive coordinators you have to deal with, the more coaching turnover you have to deal with, the more complicated it becomes and complex it becomes to learn a new system every single year. I mean, it just when guys wash out, a lot of times you see it is because there's a ton of changeover or change and turnover at the coaching and offensive coordinator position. So I agree with that. I think it's a good call. Anything else on Tua? I mean, I don't want to say that I don't think these next 2 games will decide his fate at all. I think we are where we are with Tua. And it's just a matter of, okay, let's the next 2 weeks are going to decide what kind of scrutiny Tua is going to get over the course of this offseason. What kind of scrutiny, what kind of when they're doing the talk show stuff, how, because Tua was catnip for the hot debate shows or the hot take debate shows this offseason. Will we see him be similar catnip this offseason, or can they win the next 2 games, get in the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, we know where we are. It's just, can there be growth and progress off of this, or is this sort of, are they flatlined, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, if they take a complete nosedive and miss the playoffs, and just looking at their schedule over the next 2 weeks,
if they finish 8-9,
right,
we are going to have hot take party. Yeah.
It's probably the same conversations we have with Daniel Jones right now. It's probably somewhere
the same conversations we had with Tua last offseason.
Exactly. We're in that same school of thought. But It's at New England and then at home against the New York Jets. Tua is phenomenal against the New England Patriots. So that
He's
should
never
be
lost to Belichick, right?
I believe he's never lost. I know that they're 4-0 against the spread.
And they're drawing a New England like you're going to be wearing like a t-shirt and shorts next weekend.
Yes, it's somehow going to be
like 65
warm.
degrees in January.
None of it makes sense because it was like 10 degrees here today. But whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's like 17 degrees here in North Carolina right now. It's like global warming, probably not a thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then you get the Jets at home.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about Mike White or maybe Zach Wilson. It's a pretty good setup for Tua to win the last 2 games, get in the playoffs with 10 wins. Everyone agrees this is a successful season and a good pairing. And then if you make some noise in the playoffs, more power to you. But either way, you go into year 2 with Mike McDaniel, year 4 with Tua, where you say, can they take a big leap forward with a full offseason? And if they do, maybe we start to really talk about Tua as a guy that could be getting a monster contract and an MVP candidate as he was earlier this season. All right. That'll do it for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back to recap Monday Night Football later tonight. Make sure to tune in, hit subscribe, turn on alerts. For Sully, I'm Brinson. We'll see you guys later.